We're not doing that in mindfulness. What we're doing is we're learning the techniques and the skills to deal with, these 50,000 thoughts that we have a day. How I recovered from the illness.
Wow.
It was purely through mind management, through the use of mindfulness and related techniques. And that's why I'm so passionate, because I know that I wouldn't be here today had it not been for mindfulness. I fell in love with the idea of mindfulness, the idea of realizing that your thoughts are not really you. Your thoughts are just mental events, and
that thought will probably come up. But it's being aware that is happening, having the choice in that moment, to say, not now. I choose to do something more skillful. Again, the managing of what's going on in my mind, and having the power and the training then to enforce it. You start to understand the beauty. Presence isn't just this bliss where I'm constantly in the present moment. It's like, and Daniel Goleman, who wrote Emotional Intelligence, when we were talking about it, he goes, maybe I need to change my understanding of the word present. Present isn't just this glow, like you're this divine entity walking along the beach. It's like I'm aware that I've now been distracted, go back to what I'm doing.
But no one actually teaches us how to manage our minds that are producing these 50,000 thoughts a day.
Yeah.
So that's a key message that I've been focusing on.
So David, thank you for coming down and doing this podcast. We kind of bonded over mindfulness for about a year now.
Exactly.
We've had some amazing conversations and we aligned very much on some key themes. So I wanted to have a little chat today so that you can tell me a little bit more, and then for the listeners out there, share some of your key ideas. And then I think we want to touch on, what is this word mindfulness? And why are we so passionate about it? Or why is it that people become so passionate about it?
Yeah.
And then maybe explain a little bit about how it's impacted you, and then the methods that you use to teach, and what's going on now as far as your direction and your business.
Yeah.
And what you're offering. But let's start a little bit beforehand and help us understand what do we need to know, or what can you share about your upbringing that kind of shapes your direction, your passions, and the man that you are today?
That's a great question. So a lot of this comes from, a lot of where I am today comes from my upbringing. My father was a pilot in World War II, so he flew Spitfires, and he was in the Battle of Britain.
Amazing.
And I guess he taught me survival, really, because he went up on many missions, lost many friends, and in his last mission he was hit by a German Messerschmitt, and his cockpit was on fire, and he had multiple broken bones. And when he landed, and the fire crew managed to pull him out of the cockpit just before the plane blew up, they noticed that there was a bullet hole in the cockpit on both sides, an inch behind the back of his head. So he was incredibly lucky. But I think he taught me survival skills and the importance of being able to manage your mind, really. And then it went on from there. I went to university to study philosophy. And back in the day, the curriculum was all Western philosophy, Western thinkers, Descartes, Hume, Kant, and so on. And I didn't realize that there was a thing called Eastern philosophy. And so when I discovered it, thanks to a very enlightened tutor, I just fell in love with it immediately. And so whilst doing my degree in Western philosophy, I was also reading up on Eastern philosophy in parallel.
Yeah.
And of course, as you well know, all of the original ideas about what we now call today mindfulness come from various different ancient texts. And so that's when I got into it originally. And I fell in love with the idea of mindfulness, the idea of realizing that your thoughts are not really you. Your thoughts are just mental events, and it's learning how to deal with all of that is the key to our well-being. And so over the years, I did a number of different mindfulness courses, including with the great Jon Kabat-Zinn and others. I did lots of stuff with people like Eckhart Tolle and more recently Rupert Spira, who's a spiritual teacher, but uses mindfulness as a foundation.
So you met Tolle?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, amazing.
I went to a number of his live sessions. Yeah, and I've done the same with Rupert Spira. He does lots of online work too, which I find incredibly helpful. And then what happened was in 2006, I had a period of 8 years where I really deepened my practice. So what happened was my wife was diagnosed with cancer in 2006, and she went on a horrendous cancer journey with three different events, cancer events, metastasizing and so on. And I cared for her for 4 years. And in parallel, my dad also had Parkinson's, and he was on a downward trajectory. And they both passed away within a few weeks of each other. And then after that, I was forced into the role of being a single parent, because our daughter was only 11 when her mum died. And prior to all of that, I'd been working in financial services in the city, and I was pretty burnt out anyway, because the last job I'd had was pretty manic, incredibly stressful. And then not long after my wife and my dad passed away, I fell ill myself. I was just completely wiped out. I was, as I said, I was already burnt out from the financial services role, but the caring role, of course, is exhausting, because you stop looking after yourself because you're focusing on someone else.
Yeah.
And then, of course, being a single parent, and supporting my daughter, and I just collapsed with chronic fatigue syndrome, which I suffered from for 3 years, because I was completely depleted in every way, physically, mentally, emotionally. But
Is that what burnout is?
I think it is.
Are they the same
I
thing?
think it's. I think that the burnout was just an accumulation of stress and anxiety, and not actually dealing with that stress and anxiety, which of course is where mindfulness comes in, because you're learning the techniques to observe your thoughts and understand where they're coming from, understand the emotions that are attached to them, and watch them dissolve and go away.
Yes.
So it's the lack of that observation, I think, that leads to stress and anxiety just building up over time. And I think that ends up in burnout. But I think what I had was beyond that, because I had the emotional trauma of losing my wife and my dad at roughly the same time, and then all the responsibilities of being a single parent. But the point is that it was during that 3-year period of illness that I really discovered who I was, because I used mindfulness. I used that time to deepen my practice, to develop my mindfulness skills and techniques, and that's actually how I recovered from the illness.
Wow.
It was purely through mind management, through the use of mindfulness and related techniques, and that's why I'm so passionate, because I know that I wouldn't be here today had it not been for mindfulness.
And what was your education background?
Well, I went to school in Colchester and did my O-levels and A-levels, and then I went to Keele University to study philosophy, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Where's that?
That's in Staffordshire, not far from Stoke-on-Trent. And then I went, after I graduated, I went straight into the city. I fell into the financial world by accident. You just take the first job that you're offered. It looked good. There was a training program.
You do well in that?
I did do well, really. Yeah. I mean, I was in that line of work for over 50 years.
Wow.
Which is quite a long time.
Yeah.
And yes, I did do well. I mean, I was a chief executive three times over a 15-year period. And then when I stopped working full time, I became a board director and a trustee of a number of different organisations, including a couple of well-being and mindfulness companies, which I chaired for a few years. So that's the educational background. But the reason I have this passion today is because I just see so clearly how mindfulness saved my life. Really, it was a total lifesaver. And now at this stage of my career, I'm just motivated not by money, but simply by helping people, by trying to bring the benefits of mindfulness, or as I call it, mind management, to as many people as I can.
Yeah, so why don't you explain mind management and what is it that you're currently doing to help people?
Right. So I've developed my my proposition and my content and what's unique about me. And I've over the past year I've been running coaching programs in person for small groups of people. Sort of 7 or 8 people.
Those that are suffering with anxiety, those that want to be present.
Yeah, good question.
Who is your audience?
That's a very good question.
Typically.
So there's 2 answers to that question. So first of all, so far, 2 different groups of people have emerged as the audience. First of all, very senior people. So chief executives, chairmen of boards, trustees, investment officers, very, very senior people. Executive level, C-suite level. So age range, generally sort of early 50s to early 60s. And that's definitely an important audience that's continuing, and I'm still doing one-to-one work with people like that. Secondly, and moving down the age range, the next group is, I would say, early 30s to mid 40s. And I've just done my first online version of all that content for 14 people, and they were all in that age range. The other really interesting thing, Guy, is that the vast majority of people I've coached so far have been women. I'm attracting more men. I'm finding more males now, but I'm wondering if there's something in there. I'm wondering if women generally are a bit more open-minded, a bit more intuitive, a bit more open to
this
kind of coaching.
What is it that you're putting out there for the because is the messaging be more present, learn about mindfulness, or is it stress reduction? What is the theme that is
right? So it's all of those, but the specific hook is that mind management is a skill that enables you to manage your thoughts and feelings in order to improve your well-being, your resilience, and your productivity. So that's the one sentence hook. And underneath that, people sign up because, as you rightly say, they're suffering from stress and anxiety. They might be suffering from a mind that is just too busy, too racing, always on. They might be suffering from too much self-doubt or a little bit of imposter syndrome creeping in. A couple of women on the online course, in their early 50s, were reporting that they just lost confidence in themselves, and they needed to, understand what was going on and to learn the techniques to get out of that. So it's all of those issues to do with ridiculously busy minds. Too many thoughts, as you say. Thoughts are repetitive and mostly a complete waste of time. They're not adding any value to our lives. So how do you manage that constant stream of thoughts? How do you manage a constant stream of negative emotions to improve your well-being, your clarity, your calm, your focus?
And do you have like a typical framework when you're doing one-on-one? Is it okay? Let's just go back to that last point then. So do you have a framework? We do this, and within 6 weeks or within 8 sessions it's done. Because I know the MBSR, they have was it an 8-week program? I think
that's right.
Or is it more a therapy? It's like you come in with an issue, let's talk and meet each week until they're satisfied, and they how does that work for you?
Good question. So there is a framework. So what I've tried to do is to unpack every aspect of mindfulness and explain it very clearly and simply in a conceptual way first, and then alongside that articulate what all the skills are that I'm teaching, and actually teach people how to do it, how to become mindful, how to become present, how to manage thoughts and emotions, how to deal with stress and so on. So there is a framework. But on your question about becoming more like therapy, what I've found is that within that framework, people do ask a lot of questions, so there is a lot of engagement. But on the therapy point and the sort of mentoring point more broadly, what I found is that when people say, okay, I've done your course and I've gained a lot from it, but now I'd like to do some more sessions with you.
Yeah.
This is what typically happens. People say, let's do some one-to-one sessions.
Yeah.
So in those one-to-one sessions, they are much more sort of open and free-flowing. And so I would describe those as mentoring.
Yeah.
I do actually explain to people the difference between mindfulness or mind management and therapy. So I'm not a therapist, but of course there's a lot of individual mentoring going on. And of course that's incredibly valuable.
Yeah. And, it's out of my own personal experience. I've worked with a lot of people that have tried a psychologist or a therapist before.
Yeah.
And haven't had the results. Not to say that the therapy's bad or, the psychologists don't have any value. But when they explain to me what they actually did in those sessions and more about exploring the causes and reviewing that and how mindfulness doesn't, I don't even touch, that. It's more about, okay, let's just explore what's happening now, right? And how do we manage that skillfully? And a lot of times they don't talk about that. They don't talk about mindfulness techniques. And it's almost kind of absurd when you understand what's actually going on in the mind and the frequency, the randomness, repetitiveness of thoughts. That you could teach me everything that you can about all this other good stuff, psychology, neuroscience, how it all works together, how the brain. But if you're not helping someone to see in the immediacy, right in front of your face, the thoughts and the thoughts and the thoughts, we can talk about it all we want, but I'm still going to be having that thought continuously replaying in my mind, and I think that's the key thing to address.
I totally agree, and I think you've articulated extremely well there the difference between therapy generally, accepting there are many different types of therapy, but therapy generally. And mindfulness. And people often say to me, what is it you're doing exactly? What is the difference here? Yeah. And what I always say to them is that with therapy, whatever type of therapy you're doing, what you're seeking in your exchanges with the therapist is a resolution to a specific issue or a specific piece of your personal history. We're not doing that in mindfulness. What we're doing is we're learning the techniques and the skills to deal with, these 50,000 thoughts that we have a day, these 40,000 negative and stressful thoughts that we have a day. And what people realize, and I'm sure the same applies in your teaching, what people realize with me is that, and there's a kind of a light bulb moment, what I get it now. What you're saying is that I don't necessarily need to deal with the resolution of a specific therapeutic issue. Well, I might want to, but what you're teaching me how to do is how to manage my mind, how to manage all those thoughts and feelings and physical sensations without actually necessarily getting into history, because mindfulness or mind management is all about being in the present moment. We're stripping away thoughts about the past and anxieties about the future and just focusing on being aware in the present moment.
Yeah. And I love the word manage because I use that a lot in the way that I teach, because you will have those thoughts. And let's say you faced abuse as a kid or bullying or some kind of traumatic event, and that replays in your mind. It doesn't mean that thought doesn't have any value or that there's not something you can learn from that, but it's now I'm at the dinner table with my kids. Is now a good time for me to deal with that? Or I'm in bed at night and I want to get rest, I got an early start. Is that another good time for me to have that thought? Understanding that you can't stop that thought from arising. Whatever it is that's plaguing you at that time, it might be something going on with work, it might be something from your past, it might be something in the future, whatever that may be. You must always decide in that moment, do I want this thought right now? Is it skillful? Right? And so it's understanding that, there's choice in that moment. And doesn't mean, and they say, well, what, but maybe that thought's important. Maybe it might be important, but why don't we say tomorrow morning I'll deal with it? Let me manage my time. Right? So it's almost like you have this Outlook calendar. And rather than let each of those moments be, random autopilot is going to be the contents of that. So no, let me make, from as I'm brushing my teeth, let me use that to be present. Then the first 10 minutes as I sit down to work, why don't I address that thought that I had last night that was causing me issues? right? Maybe it's a troubling conversation that I had with someone, or maybe it's speak to your therapist, speak to someone, do all that good stuff there. But then know that, okay, but after this, and I go to the gym, I no longer want to think of this. But that thought will probably come up. But it's being aware that that is happening, having the choice in that moment, to say, not now. I choose to do something more skillful. Again, the managing of what's going on in my mind, and having the power and the training then to enforce it.
Yeah.
So I don't want to think of it right now, and therefore I want to stop that thought. But easier said than done, and that's where the training and that practice comes in. So it's the ability to notice that.
Absolutely.
And then be able to enforce a decision that you make. I don't want this right now. Or I do, because you might want to continue. It's up to you. But making sure that you're choosing, and then that you then follow through.
Yeah, absolutely.
On that choice.
Yeah, that's really well explained. And, I'm dealing with a lot of business people. And so most of the issues that they're coming to me with are things that are happening to them in their work life. And I have this bit of content about the what ifs, because a lot of the time, what if type questions are what are coming into people's minds, creating nervousness and anxiety.
Yes,
What if I don't present well in this meeting? What if I don't get my point across? What if my colleagues don't think much of me? What if I fail to answer a question terribly well? What if I don't impress my boss, and so on? And this is the source of this kind of anticipatory anxiety before a meeting, before a talk, in your case, with your specialization, before a boxer starts to fight. So we're dealing with the same phenomenon, how to step back from your mind, how to not get absorbed into these anxieties about a future moment, a meeting in 10 minutes or half an hour's time, how to deal with those thoughts now in the present moment, and not let them put you off your stride. How to observe them, how to notice them, how to let them go. Doing some breathing and some grounding to say, okay, this is what I'm going to focus on in this meeting. I'm not going to try and be perfect. I'm not even going to try and be excellent. I want to get one or two key points across, and that's what will make the difference to how I feel and how others feel about me.
Yeah, and it's important to add there that it's not just the one time. It's like, if you've got a meeting, it's not, I'm anxious about the meeting, what if it goes wrong? And then I do a mindfulness technique, okay, now I'm good until the meeting. It's understanding, no, I apply my remediation, but fully aware that within a few seconds, I'm probably gonna have to go again and do it again, and again, and again, and again. And I find that it's fairly stressful, that period leading up to it. But rather than it being, 99% of that stress and anxiety and me suffering because I'm doing something that I don't want to do. I don't want to think about it, yet I am, right? So that's the suffering. But what if it's, instead of that 90, what if it's only 90% that you suffered? Or what is it, 80% or 60%? There's still going to be that initial, the thought comes up, like it punches you in the gut, right? And you can't stop that. And oh my God, what ifs, and the catastrophizing. But then quickly, okay, now apply my technique, go into it. And then, okay, I'm back now. Positive affirmation or something, back to presence. But then before you know it, again, another uppercut into the stomach. So it's understanding that it's not just the one time and you're good. It's a continual battle. But at least you're now engaged in that conversation. You're proactive, rather than just being, I'm just gonna suffer that whole time and not have any, not take part in this back and forth, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's teaching people to develop that awareness that, they have these skills and techniques, and it helps them to actually just be in the world in a different way. It's another way of being. Because whatever comes at them, whatever thoughts, difficult thoughts, intrusive thoughts that their mind produces, they know that they've got these techniques. They know they've got the confidence that they've got these skills and techniques, and they can, when they're aware, when they're in the present moment, they can use them at any time.
Yeah. That's why it's very important that with the training that I do, is to train with, we call them green thoughts, but it's like, what you're going to eat, and, a film that you watch or a friend's face, to train that muscle of, okay, I've got, picture the food that I ate, now let's drop that. let's anchor it to something, right? It doesn't have to be the breath, doesn't have to be the body, but the idea, let's get into the habit of, let's stop that thought in its tracks. We can't stop it from arising, but once we notice it, we can stop it, we can nip it in the bud. And then practice the skill of anchoring, returning to something, right? So you're training the mind. And the more that you practice that and the more familiar that you get with that, then it's a more helpful way to then dealing with, oh no, I've got a presentation with my boss, right? Dealing with extreme anxiety. Because it's like saying, hey, let's train your martial arts by throwing you in with a black belt.
Right.
You learn a little bit that way. It mostly will be you getting a battering. Yeah. But you learn something, right? And you can say, look, just be present and da. And some people will be able to do that, but the majority will not. Or they might have little glimpses of it. But in general, they'll be suffering. But when you fight a black belt for years and years, okay, fine, you then learn and you adapt and you understand what it requires and how. But that's why when I work with my students, it's trying to, especially fighters, it's like, yes, you have all these, but let's start by practicing with, let's do a bit of slight sparring. Let's do a few jabs and a few, rather than let's throw you in and fight the black belt immediately. But it's the same fundamental thing. We're going from a thought to presence.
Correct.
Going from thought to presence. And then when you get the technique of shifting between those two realities, then, okay, now let's toughen, let's make it a bit harder.
Yeah.
And then you have your comfort zone. And the further you get out of your comfort zone, the harder it's going to be and the more training that you will need, right? And that's for fighters and doing a big presentation, which is out of your comfort zone. The level of skill that's required for that is so high, right? And not only the level of skill, but the endurance. It's like, yes, can you apply it once? But can you apply it? And if you're fighting in the evening or you're at your presentation in the afternoon, all the night before and all the morning of and all that, you're having to repeat that battle. And I call it a battle, but you have to repeat that technique of, I notice I come back to doing what I choose. I notice I come back. I notice I come back. I notice I come back.
I think that's brilliant. And I think what struck me there is your use of the word endurance. I think that's absolutely crucial concept. And one of the things that I do, I have this concept called becoming positively aware, which is really kind of adding a little additional layer to all the mindfulness techniques. And it's actually using this idea of endurance. So it's helping people to not just deal with the negative thoughts and stressful emotions and all of that stuff, the overly busy mind, the catastrophizing and so on. It's going beyond that and teaching people that once they've used those skills and techniques to let negative thoughts and stresses, dissolve and soften and drift away, that they can then go into a more of a positive or even a growth mindset. And so whenever a negative thought happens, whenever a negative situation happens, you learn from that, you absorb that data, and then you talk your mind through how to convert that into a positive opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think that's crucial. And you wouldn't be able to do that if you hadn't already been taught the skills and techniques that you and I are teaching right now.
Yeah. And that's why it's, for me, although the conversations often begin around managing the unskillful thoughts, like the stress and the anxiety and the overthinking, so that it's, from that getting back to zero, but then going to the flourishing and the thriving. And the example that I love to use is, walking along the beach or in the park. How much of that walk is you being present, right? Because you can be walking along the beach, which I've done many times in Thailand, and I find I'm thinking about work. And I'm thinking about that. So it's, how do you enjoy that sunset? How do you enjoy the beach? How do you enjoy spending time with your children or anyone? And I noticed that thought. But my intention as I walked from A to B on the beach is I wanted to be present. That was my goal. And then along the way, I'm getting all these distractions that, when you practice mindfulness, it's like, so I can anticipate that. I know for a fact that as I walk along the beach, I'm going to be hit left, right, and center with all these different thoughts. So I prep myself, and it's like that management again. I'm booking time in the diary now to say, hey, this is presence time. So that as I'm walking along the beach, enjoying it and being present, every time I notice that with kindness, I say, there you are, I've expected you. Now I want to return to the beach. Now I'm back in the amazement of the beach. Oh yeah, but what about the kids? No, not now, because now is this. I'm choosing that in this time, oh yeah, but what? And so I keep coming back. So again, rather than it be like 90% where I was just off in thinking land,
Yep.
I've actually now used that time powerfully where I've drifted off. Oh yeah, but now I'm back. And so if we had like a timer, like when you play chess, it's like I start walking on the beach, I'm pressing my timer in a chess game. Oh, this is amazing. And then thoughts, then they press the timer. Oh yeah, but what about that thing you need to do? And if you're not aware of that, it's like, how quickly can you press your timer again? So that when you come to the end of the beach, when we look at the charts, what percentage of that is you being present and what percentage is you being in thought? And then once you learn to kind of gamify it like that, then you start to understand the beauty. Presence isn't just this bliss where I'm constantly in the present moment. It's like, and Daniel Goleman, who wrote Emotional Intelligence,
Yep.
when we were talking about it, he goes, maybe I need to change my understanding of the word present. Present isn't just this glow like you're this divine entity walking along the beach. It's like walking, I'm aware that I've now been distracted, go back to what I'm doing. I'm aware that I'm being distracted, go back to what I'm doing. And so that way you start to enjoy life. Rather than the months flowing by, wow, it's paycheck again, paycheck, and it's Christmas again. And before we know it, the World Cup's going to be on in a couple of months. And life just flies by. But then when you start to, even with the brushing your teeth and walking my kids to school and having conversations and in the work that you do, productivity and focus, you start to be present in more activities.
That's right. Yeah.
You start to be more present in life.
Yeah.
And then the way that you experience everything
It's completely different.
is completely different.
And you're right. The thing is that as you practice these skills, you develop this amazing thing called awareness, which, as you rightly said, is a skill in itself. Mm-hmm. But part of what you get with this awareness, this being in the moment, is that you do realize that inside you are actually quite naturally very, very peaceful and calm. And so this is one of the wonderful benefits of developing, awareness as a skill and all of the mindfulness techniques. You're not just dealing with all of these annoying and intrusive thoughts, but you're experiencing what it is to be you, really, this sort of natural feeling of peace and calm. And what I teach is that meditation really is not something that we kind of do. It's actually what we are. It's actually part of us, that natural peaceful state that we arrive at in meditation through awareness. That's who we are.
Yeah. And I love to frame it in, it's not my original idea, but the idea that as I'm noticing these thoughts, it's like, well, what is the entity that is aware of that? Am I this angry thought, or am I the awareness to that angry thought? And am I the fear, or am I the witness to that fearful thought? And the more you do it, as John calls it, that you create this dualism. There's this separation with, hey, I am not these thoughts. I am not the observer, because I know John doesn't like that. When you reify it, he's like, you are observing. I am observing, or not even I. There's the observing of that.
Yeah.
And then it opens a whole new world. Well, what is this thing that is observing? And you start to drop labels. And they're not so much what you learn what you are. It's like learning what you're not. And the more you peel away of learning, unlearning all these things that you were limiting yourself.
Yeah. Very true.
And it can get, then that is the whole philosophical side as well, and that can get very spiritual, because then it's not only that, but then it goes down to your existence as something physical in itself, right? Am I this body? Am I this? And that's another fun avenue to explore as well.
The way I express it is that there are really two things. There's the content of our experience, and there's our awareness. Mm-hmm. So the content of our experience is everything that happens in our mind. So that's thoughts, feelings, physical sensations, and sense perceptions, seeing, tasting, feeling, smelling, and so on. So there's the content of our experience, and then there's our awareness. And the way I express it is that our awareness is like a container in which the content of our experience happens.
Yeah.
And so what we learn to do in mindfulness and mind management is to develop this wonderful thing called awareness and recognize that it's our awareness in which everything in our life is happening. But the thoughts and the feelings that occur inside our awareness are just like clouds passing by in the sky. The sky is equivalent to our awareness because it's always there. Might be in the background, but it's always there. It's vast, it's limitless. And the clouds are just like, our thoughts and our feelings which appear and disappear. They're kind of like weather patterns in our mind. But the key thing I try and get people to focus on is that everything happens inside our awareness. And that's not going to a spiritual place. That's still sticking with the totally practical.
What do you find is the most challenging? Because mindfulness is so vast.
Huge,
right? And it's not just less stress. We know it's so much. What do you find are the challenging things about explaining mindfulness and
I don't find it challenging to explain mindfulness, and I think one of my unique selling points is that because I've been doing it for so long, 50 odd years, I've developed a conceptual framework to clearly and simply explain everything about mindfulness. So I don't find that difficult, and the evidence is that everyone that I've taught so far really appreciates that framework. Where I think the challenge is that what we need to do in mindfulness and mind management is we do need to learn how to recognize our thoughts and our emotions and understand the connections and the triggers between thoughts and feelings and so on. So the difficult bit, to answer your question, is that not everybody necessarily wants to go there in that sort of interrogation of their mind. You have a great expression that you're like a scientist in the laboratory of your mind. Not everybody, at least not at first, necessarily wants to be that scientist looking into the laboratory of their mind, assessing and analysing and recognising everything that's going on. So there is a resistance in some people to that at first, but what I've found is that once people are comfortable with the concepts of mindfulness and mind management, and they understand that actually, that there is this relatively simple process, in the observing and the recognizing and the noticing of difficult thoughts and so on. Once they get into that, they get more confidence, and they realize that it then comes naturally to notice thoughts, notice the connections with emotions and so on. And then once they've actually gone through that process of observation, what happens, and the thoughts and the emotions have gently dissolved and faded away, what happens is that there's immediately some fresh calm and clarity, and new energy is released as well. So people immediately feel better.
Yeah. And it's a game changer.
It's transformational. I mean, I got a couple of testimonials back from my recent course, and one young woman said to me, I just never realized that what I needed to do was to focus on awareness rather than the contents of what's going on in my head. And now that I realize that, I can see that this is going to be totally transformational for me, because I now have a few techniques to manage all these difficult thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
So it is, you're absolutely right, it is totally transformational.
But what it does, it also highlights the massive problem globally, because
Totally.
we're not trained at any point in our lives on awareness.
Correct.
Or the, no one explains this,
That's right.
the perpetual thinking.
That's right.
So therefore you kind of battle it out yourself.
And that's one of my hooks, right? To answer your earlier question about hooks. One of my hooks is, we are taught so much in our lives. We're taught about how to think, how to plan, how to solve problems. We're even taught how to sleep. But no one actually teaches us how to manage our minds that are producing these 50,000 thoughts a day.
Yeah.
So that's a key message that I've been focusing on. And when people get their minds around that, yes, okay, I get it. We're actually having 50,000 thoughts a day, 40,000 of which are negative, 45,000 of which, picking up your point about thoughts being repetitive, are ones that we had yesterday and the day before. So what a complete waste of time all this mental stuff going on actually is.
Yeah.
And so learning the skill to get our minds to work with us rather than against us is crucial.
Yeah. So a couple more questions. If people want to find out a bit more, and maybe attend one of your courses, where can they do that? How can they reach out to you?
Go to the website, which is positivelyaware.co.uk, and just have a quick look and book a 15 or 30-minute discovery call with me.
Yeah. There's no commitment.
No commitment, no charge, all completely relaxed.
To find out a bit more,
just to
find out
chat,
if there's a fit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So explain maybe why you've booked the call. What are your concerns, and I can share how I can help.
Okay. And last question, that is our usual outro question. What matters most to you?
Helping people learn these techniques to be much more effective at managing what goes on in their minds, because from my own experience, I know that has a transformational effect on our mental health and well-being, our resilience, and just how we live, how productive we can be with our lives. Productive in every sense, with our work, our relationships, and just enjoying life.
Wonderful. All right, well, you heard it here. Thank you very much. I love the way that you explained about mindfulness.
My pleasure, thank you.
Happy to get this out there and share.
Thank you very much, Guy. Wonderful, thank you.